This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Bitrefill. Bitrefill is the best way to spend your crypto in Latin America. Purchase gift cards or mobile refills from more than 3,500 brands in 186 countries instantly, safely, and privately. Visit bitrefill.com for more information. Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Today, we have a special episode, the highly anticipated Argentina Roundtable. We have 6 esteemed Argentina enthusiasts here with us tonight. So a lot of Argentina knowledge, very timely as well. Obviously, Milei having just been elected around a week ago. But with us today, and I'm going to introduce you guys all individually, just kind of do a quick hi, maybe introduce yourselves. I guess I'll go starting top left. We have Mr. Martin Johnson.
What's going on?
Live from Buenos Aires.
I am in Buenos Aires.
Cool. We have Luke as well. Don't make me butcher your last name. So Luke, hit us with an intro.
Yeah, my name is Luke Mikic. I escaped Australia in 2022 and now been living in Latin America for the past 24 months, just trying to travel to as many countries as some of you lads.
Excellent. We got Mr. Joe DeJenny as well, previous podcast guest.
What's up? I'm gonna be more friendly on this podcast. The last one, Joe DeJenny here. I've been in Latin America. I think I'm going on 8 years. Mostly living here, between here and the U.S. And I live next to a busy street now, so if you hear a little honking, that's me.
The Latin Hammer. We needed that.
Instagram.
We needed that. Martin Johnson, I forgot to mention, is also a previous podcast guest. And then next up, we have James Nuveen, also a previous podcast guest, Twitter friend. James, what's up?
What's up, guys? Yeah, I'm James. Been down here in Latin America for a little bit more than 2 years. Spent only about 2 months in Argentina, but love that time. Spent most of my time in Colombia.
Mm-hmm. But it was recent, too, so you were tweeting about it and stuff. So I was like, you know what? I'll throw this guy an invite.
Yeah, that was about 6 months ago. So a pretty recent stay in Buenos Aires. Yeah.
Ah, shit, it was 6 months ago? I thought that was more recent than that. Anyway, good enough. You're here. Cool. And perhaps most importantly, or at least most famous as the Argentina guy, we have Mr. BowTiedMara.
Hello there, guys. Nice to be on. Thanks
Previous
for having me.
podcast guest as well. And then recent addition invited by Mr. BowTiedMara, BowTiedLeviathan, apparently Argentine, has been outed.
Hey, what's up, guys? So, I'm a Argentine living in the States right now. I've been here for 6 months, but 99.9% of my life was in Buenos Aires, so I think I can say a thing or two. I was also part of the political movement that right now ended up in Milei being the president, so I may have a thing or two to tell
Good.
about
Opinions
the
are good,
process.
and it's good to have Argentine to kind of balance out all of the gringo Argentina enthusiasts. Awesome. So with the intros out of the way, I guess let's jump right into it. This is an audio only podcast, so people will have to kind of follow the voices a little bit. But luckily, lots of kind of different accents and voices here. So honestly, it shouldn't be too hard if you can distinguish Martin from James. After that, everyone else kind of has like a pretty unique voice, I feel. So we should be good to go. Let's kick things off with Mr. BowTiedMara. Probably like the number one Argentina guy on Twitter practically, or Gringo Latam Twitter, whatever you want to call it. So happy to have you here. How's life?
Yeah, life is good. It's every single day. I basically can publish that meme, "Qué linda mañana, qué hermosa mañana," because that's basically what it feels like. I mean, of course, nothing changed yet, and it's still like a complete shit show in terms of, the big explosive hyperinflationary bomb that this government is leaving the next administration, or Milei's government, who will only start from December 10th. But just the idea of that shift to a more open economy, or the mindset. Of course, we need to see how it works in practice, but that is already a very positive thing. I mean, it's something that I personally did not expect at all. I thought, with the whole state apparatus, China pitching in, Brazil helping out, I was just like, yeah, man, Massa's going to win. It's like almost impossible to win this election just because of you know the amount of money involved is just nuts. And if you see like the inflation that this whole campaigning of Massa has generated additionally of what was already very inflationary, it's seriously almost ripe for treason. I would say it's really bizarre, like the levels to which they went to try to fund the campaign with public funds, basically.
Dude, there was literally like propaganda of Massa absolutely everywhere. Every single billboard, you've got posters of Massa's face, pasted on windows of shops all around the city. It's unbelievable. Have you guys, has anyone seen any advertisements for Milei in the city?
I saw some in my neighborhood, but they've all been torn off, and then afterwards they were pasted over with Massa adverts. It was basically at the start of the campaign, and then very quickly it just all went away. And you really noticed that Millet had zero budget, because every weekend, on every corner of the street, there were always like these stands from the other parties, and there was never a stand for Millet, handing out flyers and whatever. So it was really like almost a native internet thing where everybody just started talking about Millet, but you didn't really have the on the ground action going on that is so characteristic for all these politicians usually.
Mar-
So every time a campaign is ongoing, you have to uh, declare how much money are you spending on that campaign, and that's public for everybody. Milei's statement says that he spent 0 pesos with 0 cents on the campaign. So everything that you've seen, either on social media or in the street, like people working, giving out like papers and things like that, it was all volunteer and people using their own money just to finance everything.
Mara, do
So it was basically a couple shit posters on Twitter and people who wanted to help against $16 billion in pesos spent, plus money from China, plus money from Brazil, with ghost companies working on ads on the internet, and just was monstrosity, like Mara said.
Mara and Leviathan, do you guys see Malay's election as being like the first domino in a whole series of dominoes, either in just Latin America or the world? Do you see that being like the first domino in a big series of cataclysmic events?
I mean, it has the potential to be. So far, like until anything happens, I think it's just another a government voting out the sitting government during COVID. Because basically, what we've seen is every single government that came out of COVID was voted out. Basically, it was all changes of government all across the continent. Um, so it could be that, or it could be really a more from the ground up kind of change, which I think is definitely happening with younger people, and that could spread over to other countries. Like for example, in Chile, I'm pretty sure that they're kind of done with Boric's experiment of semi-socialism there. I know that in Colombia they're kind of tired. I'm not sure, like after the midterm outcome, I don't think they're going to re-elect Petro there. Um, Lula, we'll have to see. But with him like upping taxes, deficit spending again, etc. I'm not sure if unless we get a commodity bull market, which could happen, they will pull out. But unless that happens, I'm not sure if he's going to have such a great presidency either. But he just started, so he still has some time there to fix things. But yeah, and Peru is basically a very unstable kind of situation that just yeah, I'm not even sure like how what's going on right there right now because it's so chaotic. Paraguay always chill, always right, more right wing. Uruguay always more neutral. But yeah, I mean, all eyes are on Milei internationally. I'm really surprised by the amount of media attention that he's getting, and also media attention from like not only the bizarre Trumpian angle, but also more of like the libertarian side. I think that's really positive that they're highlighting, the more anarcho-capitalist side of Milei.
Hmm. Yeah. You know what's interesting about Luke's story is he's living both of the biggest stories right now in politics, right? He lives full time in El Salvador, so he's living the Bukele dream, and now he's spending time in Argentina, and his timing is impeccable because he was here for the victory. Now he's chilling, and so he's seeing the Milei victory. So the Australian guy is just at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I call Latin America my home now. I think going back to like James's question, I think it's a really important point you raise. Like, I think the election of Milei is a huge domino. I think it's a huge signal. I think if you look back over the past 250 years, I think we're on this bigger trend of more and more centralization. But I think this actually changed in 2016. So I think the election of Trump was a massive, signal. People saying, "Hey, hang on a minute, I'm fucking sick of all this centralized power." And then obviously you saw Brexit in the same year, 2016. You see the election of Bukele in El Salvador. And then I think Millet is an absolutely huge domino that's kind of signaling, the little guy's fed up. He's fed up with this centralized power. And I think for the first time since the 1770s with the American and the French Revolution, I hope we're beginning to see the signs of, more of a decentralized revolution. So yeah, I'm living amongst it in Latin America because I think you're going to want to avoid many of these Western nations in the next decade. Because as the sovereign individual book lays out, they're going to become increasingly tyrannical as they try to deal with the enormous amounts of debt that they do have. So I'm pretty pumped to be living and spending my time between El Salvador and Argentina, and just trying to learn as much about the region from chaps like yourself.
I think that we also have to understand what is happening in the countries in which people like Milei or Bukele are winning, right? Because for a country to make the decision to put someone in power that's going to make so much of a radical change, uh, you have to understand the circumstances that that country was going through, right? In El Salvador was the most dangerous country in America, in the continent. People could not be walking on the street because they were risking their lives, right? And it was so fucked up that somebody had to come and say, "Yo, I'm going to fix this," and we have to do this on a radical way because there's no other way to fix it. So he won, right? In Argentina, uh, we have we are at risk of hyperinflation. We have been on 4 years on perpetual crisis. People have no prospect for a future, and we had governments that, no matter on which side they would be on the spectrum, they demonstrated that were not up to the task, and the only thing they cared about was to stay in power, to keep with their privileges and their shady businesses. And all that situation made the Argentine people to basically be living in misery, right? So when this crazy dude comes and starts talking on TV, insulting politicians on their faces, and explaining to people why are they getting poor, why the politicians will never fix their problems, and people are angry because they're living like shit, that can make somebody like Milei uh, a potential solution to that problems, and that's why people follow him, right? But you can take a country in Europe that people think they are living the life of the first world, and they think that gender pronouns are the most important issue in their existence, right? It's more difficult for a person like Milei to have power over there, right? So Latin America is a very specific kind of place because all of us have been living under socialism most of our lives, right? With very specific exceptions, but people are just fed up with it. They're just done.
Leviathan, I
And that also influences a lot. But I still agree that Millet, if he does well, could be a positive change, like the domino piece that will bring more movements like him all around the continent and
Hey,
maybe overseas.
Leviathan and Mara, you might have a good answer to this question too, because you've been there for so long. Obviously, hyperinflation has been around in Argentina for a while. This isn't anything new to the Argentine people. Obviously, it's probably reached a climax now, but the Argentines have been living under hyperinflation and socialism and Peronism for a long time. What makes 2023 so special? Is it the charisma of Milei that kind of garnered all this support and all this like grassroots,
Well, I think it's
like
also because
grassroots?
he's not part of the what they call la casta, or the political caste. He's really an outsider in terms of he's never been politically active up until the moment that he decided to run for deputy, and he got elected, and then 1 year later he decided to run for president, just to basically kick everybody out. That was the phrase. Of course, many people just read that, okay, this is just, more right wing populism because that's the way you win elections. But in his case, it was actually, because politicians say things all the time and everybody knows it's kind of fake. But in his case, because he came from outside as an economist, and people have seen him on TV for 10 plus years, and he always said the same kind of things. It's more like they're more likely to believe him. So I think that is a big trust factor, and we'll have to see how his government turns out, because there's so many roadblocks and potential issues that he has to overcome. Especially socially, I think it will become like quite interesting, because like you said, it's the country's been governed by Peronism for so long. They're really ingrained in every single layer of society, and in power structures. Goes for unions, for social movements. So basically, with the flick of a switch, they can just decide to, okay, we're going to protest here. We're going to have these unions, stop the whole logistical chain, et cetera, of the country. So they can really do a lot of damage that way. Um, Now, the big question is, will they be able to do that? And if the government starts acting against that, and that's what I think there is a danger. Like, if they react too violently on this, then it's going to become like fascism, all those kind of things you're going to see in mainstream media. If somebody gets killed in riots or whatever, it's all going to be like the Bukele story that we already know in mainstream media. And then you see these kind of right wing guys, and they crack down and they kill people. It's going to be that kind of story. So I think they're definitely going to try to provoke.
This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Language Blend, the new best way to learn Spanish. Language Blend focuses on what you actually need to live and get by abroad. With daily one-on-one lessons, a dedicated texting partner, it's like living in a Spanish-speaking country without ever leaving home. Go to languageblend.com for more information.
About that, and we'll see like how they deal with it.
So Argentina is a very particular case. First, let's talk about the James question about why Milei managed to win. So in 2001, Argentina had its worst crisis in his entire history. We had a huge bank run, what we call the Corralito, and there was a massive protest. People died, but the slogan of that protest was "We want everybody out, que se vayan todos," right? And what happened is that nobody left. The same people stayed, and they keep doing the same things that caused the 2001 crisis in the first place. Milei came and said, "Okay, the reason those people you wanted out never left is because they are what he calls a casta politica, right? The people who are there, they are in power, they are power, they have the institutions, they make their businesses there, and they're never going to leave. You have to kick them out by putting different people in power." And I think that's something that resonated a lot, because people never had an answer, a political answer to the issues they faced, right? If you wanted Peronism out, you would have to vote for an anti-Peronist. But that anti-Peronist doesn't necessarily uh, uh, holds a political ideology that you may hold, right? But you have to vote
Can I
for
ask you a
him because
question?
he's not Peronist, right?
For the
So you can
audience and
have,
honestly for myself as well,
yeah.
what is Peronism? What is a Peronist? As easy as possible, like a
So
10-second response.
yeah, so 1945 President Juan Domingo Perón was the big fascist populist government of the South America. He basically invented this power structure of socialism and welfare and things like that. And he was a huge uh, political phenomenon that left a legacy that still holds power to this day, right? So Peronism is the doctrine of government that follows Juan Domingo Perón's ideals, basically. Uh, So you either have the Peronist Party or you have the anti-Peronist Party, which has a lot of names. Long time ago was the Radicals, and now with Mauricio Macri, you had Juntos por el Cambio or PRO, and now you had Milei, and when Milei came, right, he came to say, okay, now you don't have to choose between a Peronist that you don't like and an anti-Peronist that the only thing he has going for him is that he's not Peronist, but he can be a socialist too.
Okay, just
He
two
can be a
different
communist
degrees of
too,
socialism.
right? He's not going to solve your problem. He's only going to kick,
Got it.
yeah, he's only going to kick Peronists out for 4 years, but because he's not going to fix the country, they are going to come back,
Got it.
right? Because he's going to fuck up too, right? So Milei was this alternative that would bring true change while kicking the Bernies
Got it.
out.
Yeah, I do think it's important to get a footnote there for non-Argentines. Basically, Peronism can morph into anything it wants to. It because we've had left-wing Peronism. It started basically with very fascist kind of right-wing Peronism. That's the core. It's based on Mussolini's state model, which is basically the state ingrained with big companies to rob what they can. Actually, his whole labor law is based on the Carta del Lavoro from Mussolini. He basically copied that to Spanish. He also, ran an internship in the Italian military during Mussolini. So basically, that's the base. Then it morphed into a whole bunch of stuff, and then in the '90s, it became more what they call here neoliberal, where they started privatizing everything. But Menem, he was also a Peronist, but he was completely different. And then from the 2000s onwards, they had a really bad taste in their mouths from the 90s of the neoliberals, and they started to become much more left wing Marxist. And that's been basically the past 20 years has been way more socialist and nationalizations and so basically that's the stain that everybody remembers of Peronism. But a few people that today cheer for Peron actually know what the base is, or don't have any connection to that. Yeah, but it were different times, and they have all kinds of excuses for it. But yeah, so it's really interesting. Like, it's kind of a chameleon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a power structure. It's not an
Okay.
ideology. It's a power structure. They will do anything to stay in power, no matter if they have to be right wing, they'll be right wing. If they have
All
to be
right.
left
Could,
wing,
could, could I
they will
stop
be
you,
left wing.
Leviathan? I just don't
But
want
you
things to
could
be
say,
too
but
like ideology, blah blah blah, left right. Let's try to keep things like really actionable for the audience.
Yeah.
And I think it might be a
mhm,
little bit more interesting that way for people who
sure,
don't really need all the nuance of Argentine politics. So I'll hit you. I'll hit you with a
absolutely.
question that I guess anyone can jump in on. But what's up with dollarization? Are we going to dollarize? Is the peso staying? What are we doing here? What's
We don't
what's
know
I
yet.
haven't like investigated all the speeches and stuff. What's it looking like?
So to dollarize, we need dollars, and we currently do not have any. The Federal reserves are completely empty. Um, So right now, Milei and his economic team just came back from the United States, looking for money, and
Hmm.
it looks like they got it. Uh, so in December 10th, he is going to uh, put into Congress an omnibus law. It's a law that has a lot of laws. In that law should be the dollarization project, and it should start taking effect after that. It's not going to be instantaneously. It's going to take maybe 9 to 24 months, depending of what happens, right? Because Argentina's economic
Right.
volatility is
Yeah,
so
it doesn't
high, you
happen
cannot
overnight.
predict 1 month in advance, let alone 2 years. Um, First, you have to do some financial stuff. I don't know if you want me to talk about it. It's kind of complex. Something called the kicks. It's like some government bonds that have to be paid before you can make any project of
Yeah.
dollarization, because that's like a hyperinflationary bond. But we think that if everything goes right, we should have dollarization by the end
So
of
you think it's going to happen?
2025,
What do you
maybe
think,
earlier.
Mara? You think they're going to dollarize?
Well, yeah, I think it will take at least 2 years, maybe 3 years, to get the books in order, and uh, and then we'll have to see if they have the funds for it, because do need a lot of billions to dollarize. I mean, people have dollars. There's like a huge amount of dollars, but those are private. Of course, the government can't use those. Um, So I think first things first, we'll see, taking care of the fiscal situation, and then really trying to get rid of inflation as much as possible. And that will probably take 2 years. Next year, we'll probably see 400, 500% inflation first before it gets lower.
Jesus.
Just because it's such an hyperinflationary bomb right now. It's set in stone that this will happen. Even, if you would cut everything tomorrow, we still have like a lag of 6 to 12 months of very high inflation, because it's like a
Hmm.
pressure cooker, because they had so many price controls, this fake official dollar that many importers had access to. um, all that stuff is going to go away, so basically that all those prices are going to explode. So I think first we're going to get a lot higher inflation before it goes down. It's sort of like the same dynamics that we saw during the previous hyperinflation, which was a lot worse in 1989. I think we reached 5,000% at that point. So we're not there yet, but and hopefully we don't get there.
1,000.
Yeah.
So you guys are both saying that dollarization is going to happen. Obviously, it doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take a year or two to put in motion and work out deals and stuff like that. It would be the biggest country outside the United States using dollars. You know, there's Ecuador, there's El Salvador, there's Panama, there's Palau. And you guys really think it's going to happen?
Well, it's yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not,
it's like
but
currency
it could.
competition. It's not
Yeah.
that he wants to install dollarization. Okay, everybody needs to use dollars. It's more like, you can use whatever you want to use, but the state will probably, since the dollars is what they use the most, they'll probably dollarize, but not mandatory. Um,
So Argentina has a huge relationship with the dollar. The Argentine people are obsessed with the dollar. So what Milei says is that okay, we're just gonna get rid of the peso, but buying those pesos with dollars, right? So people will have dollars in their hands, in their bank deposits, in everything. After that happens, there is no legal tender anymore. You can use whatever currency you want. Can be dollars, can be euros, can be reales, can be Bitcoin if you want to. It can be whatever you want. Of course, 99.9% of people are going to use dollars, so it's like kind
Yeah,
of de
because my
facto
my idea
dollarization,
of
but not
dollarization
technically.
is like
You
it's
have to pay
the
taxes
legal
in dollars.
tender that you pay your taxes with and that
Yes,
you
we
get
won't
paid your
have
salary
legal
with.
tender.
Maybe I have the wrong idea of what dollarization means. I know it could be kind of like a instrument level thing, but like what are people actually going to get paid with and pay their taxes with? Do you guys think that that could be dollars a couple of years from now?
yeah,
It's gonna be dollars, but again, it's not gonna be if some company feels like paying you in euros and you accept that contract, they could do it. We will not have a legal tender, but again, 99% of payments are going to be in dollars because people just use
I feel
dollars.
like
I
it'll
mean, it's the
be
culture.
a similar
The culture is
situation. And Luke, you might have a perspective on this. It might be a similar situation to what is going on in El Salvador. Like what Bukele did was open the gates to whatever currency the people and companies wanted to use. They could use dollars, they could use Bitcoin. And I feel like that's kind of what Malay's plan is to de-dollarize or to dollarize the economy, to give more so the option of using dollars or pesos or Bitcoin or whatever you want, more so than exclusively doing everything in dollars. Is that right?
yeah. I would say that's the idea behind Milei. Now, in practice, because I've seen a lot of people on Twitter, yeah, Bitcoin and whatever. In practice, I want to ask Luke a question. Like, you've been more on the ground in El Salvador. Like, how many people actually use Bitcoin versus dollars?
Yeah, so if I had to guesstimate, in the main city, it's probably about 5% of the population. That's my anecdotal kind of experience. If you look at the actual hard statistics on how many people are actually using the Chivo wallet, which is the wallet that all of the merchants in El Salvador use to accept Bitcoin and convert that Bitcoin into dollars, a lot of the hard statistics kind of back that up. They say about 10% of all Salvadorians are still using this Chivo wallet. So they're accepting Bitcoin in like 2023. So this is a couple of years after the legal tender announcement. So obviously adoption varies. In the major city, probably about 5%. On Bitcoin Beach, it's probably more like 20%, maybe 25% of people actually accept Bitcoin.
Okay, yeah, well, I mean, 5% is not bad. No, because I always hear Bitcoiners when they go to El Salvador, they kind of complain that the adoption is not there yet in terms of what they'd expect.
Yeah, so many people say, "Oh, Bitcoin's only at 5% adoption. It's failed." Like I think the country's it's made some pretty big leaps and strides in only 2 years. It's gone from 0 to 5% adoption, and like it's really interesting because sure, some shops don't accept Bitcoin, but most of those shops that don't accept Bitcoin, they're very very technically inept. Like they're like El Salvador's a third world country. they don't even have computers. So it's natural for many of the stores to not accept Bitcoin. They don't even have a smartphone. But for example, I lived in El Salvador for 6 months straight. I tried to spend Bitcoin every single day. I spent Bitcoin on over 300 occasions. So every single major grocery store accepted Bitcoin. Your pharmacies accepted Bitcoin. Your major big like technology stores all accepted Bitcoin. So I think the country's certainly come a long way.
That's cool. Yeah.
So wouldn't dollarizing necessarily mean getting rid of the peso? Because all the countries like Ecuador and whatever, that they used to have a different currency, and then that currency had problems, and then they got rid of it to use the dollar. Do you see a world where they're using pesos and dollars at the same time, or is the idea?
The peso is not, it's not going to exist anymore. So what Milei is going to do is he's going to get dollars from wherever he finds them. Probably he's going to issue more debt. He's going to buy every single peso bill that's on the street, on your wallet, on your hand, under your mattress, whatever. He's going to buy them with dollars. So you're going to have an amount of dollars equal to that quantity of pesos, depending on the peso dollar exchange rate at the time. He's also going to buy every bank deposit and bonds, or whatever, what we call encajes bancarios. Uh, After that's done, once there's not a single peso running around anymore, he's going to close the part of the central bank who's in charge of printing pesos, right? So pesos are not
Wow.
going to exist anymore. They're gone.
Mara, would you agree with that?
Um, yeah, I think that's the only way to get rid of the hyperinflation over time, because otherwise it will just end up with the same scenario. The thing is, like, to actually close the central bank, that's going to be a real challenge legally, because it's kind of set in a part of the constitution as well. Um, well, I mean,
Not
that's what a
really.
lot of constitutionalists differ. Yeah,
I mean, I mean, yes, but you can just close the
yeah, but
money
then
printing
after Milei's
department,
gone, they can open it again.
and that's
That's the thing. Like, it's not fully closed, because the solution is there's this thing called peso oro, which is basically a legal coin that is a peso pegged to a certain gold rate, and it's used in legal contracts, etc. It's a legal currency. Nobody uses it, but it's used by the government, and a way to sort of bypass the legal obstacles is to just declare that the legal currency, because the Constitution says you have to have a currency that the central bank has to provide. They could use that and then like cut off the normal peso, and then technically on paper Argentina has its own currency, but they wouldn't be printing anything. So that's a solution. But then technically, the next government could say, well, now we're going to install a printer again, and we're going to do everything like we've always done.
even so. History has shown that it's extremely hard to come back from a dollarization, right? Because you say, okay, the next government can just come back and
Yeah,
start
that's
printing
also true.
pesos.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna touch them. Like it's politically impossible. After let's say that Milei it's on power for 8 years, you have 8 years of using the dollar, and some dude comes here and say, "I'm going to bring the peso back." Nobody's gonna vote for him, and if he tries to do it, he's gonna fail. Like you don't have the political power to do it. People would just not accept it because they know what's gonna happen, right? You have the case of Ecuador. They survived two defaults, two debt defaults, and the dollarization it's still ongoing. And the presidential candidate that wanted to bring whatever the currency's name is back, he just fucking lost, right? So it's really
Leviathan,
difficult to come
speaking
back
of
after
coming
that.
back, do you
Yes,
plan on going back to Argentina? Are you optimistic?
not yet. I want to come back with money, right? That's what I left in the first place. And even if even so, Milei won, right? But it's gonna be a while until Argentina starts, going to the moon again. He has to basically remake the entire institutional
Yeah.
structure from scratch, and that's gonna take a lot of time. It's not just the dollar. It's not just inflation. Argentina has it's rotten to its core, and you have to change everything.
Mm.
You have to get rid of a lot of regulations. You have to get rid of a lot of taxes. You have to do tax reforms. Uh, you have to fix again, as Mara said, all the fiscal government spending problems. And after that's done, Argentina is going to start growing again. For the people that have money now, they can wait a little bit, and then they will have really big opportunities. For the people who are Argentine, who are living in Argentina, who have no means to get any kind of capital that's not in pesos, and even then, it's just really little money. No, they are not going to just be millionaires overnight, right? You still need capital, and the average Argentine, it's not gonna make more money that it's what it's making now anytime soon. Like, it's maybe go up a little bit, but again, it's gonna
Yeah,
take
and
a lot of
beyond
time.
institutional change, there, let's be honest, there's a bit of a social element. Like there would need to be social change
Yes,
going on in this country as
Yeah,
well, if we're being
yes,
honest.
social change.
yeah, cultural change.
Cultural
Yeah,
change, exactly.
yeah, that's very important. I would say the midterms in 2025, that is like a key moment. If Milei can
Yes,
get more seats in Congress during those elections, that would be the best case scenario. Because then, right now, even with the alliance with Macri's party, they don't have enough seats to really get a majority. Um, well, I mean that
they do
everybody
actually.
except the parents have to work together. It's really a couple seats.
So what happens now, because of the way the seats on Congress and Senate get changed in elections, even though Milei came first, he only has 10% of seats in Congress. Uh, so he has to negotiate a lot with the guys who came in third place, which is Mauricio Macri's party, Juntos por el Cambio. Uh, that could slow down a lot of the radical reforms that Milei wants to make, because uh, this Mauricio Macri's party is kind of a center right, sometimes center left, depending on the day. So again, it's not guaranteed that Argentina is going to become this anarcho-capitalist country overnight, because even though Milei won, he still doesn't have a power structure strong enough
Okay.
to do everything on his own, right? He needs the consensus from a lot of people that may not want to lose their privileges, and all those things. So again, we have to see what happens after December 10th. We have to see how this omnibus law that he wants to pass goes,
What
if
does
it
that mean,
gets accepted,
omnibus?
if it gets rejected. If omnibus law is a law that has a lot of laws,
Yeah, it's basically a
like a
package
big
like this
bus, and
filled
every
with
passenger
laws
is a law.
that he files all at once.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe some of those laws are passed, some of those laws are not passed. Maybe they change how some of them work, right? We know that in that omnibus law, we're going to have the reform of the state. So that's going to be like huge cut on public spending. We are going to have a lot of we are going to get rid of a lot of regulations surrounding
Hmm.
commerce and markets. Uh, and after that, they will have to again work on being on a fiscal surplus. After that, they have to get rid of the cepo cambiario, which is the restriction to buy foreign currency. After that, they have to make the tax reform. After that, they have to make the labor reform. After that, they have to dollarize again, and that's going to take years, maybe even more than one mandate, right? What Milei calls first generation reforms and second
Definitely
generation
sounds like
reforms.
a tall order.
We just don't know. Again, Argentina, it's not a place when you can think long term. Like every day, something can happen. Like literally yesterday, in the like at 9 in the night, Sergio Massa, the current Minister of Economics, who ran from president against Milei, he just did a really big move with the central bank, which could mean that after December 10th, we would have to print a half of a monetary base, which would again cause a lot of more inflation, and that could change all the mathematics that Milei's team are making to push the reforms, and that could change the planning that we just don't know. We also have another huge problem in Argentina. We have something called the aguinaldo. So basically, if you make, I don't know, a million peso, 1.2 million pesos a year, instead of making 100,000 pesos a month, you would make a little bit less, and then they would give you like one of that part that they took from you in the middle of the year and at the end of the year, and people think it's like an extra income, which is not. Well, they have to pay all of the aguinaldos from the public sector, and they
Okay.
have no money.
Lots of problems. I'm sure we could, run
So they will
through. It
have
would
to
take
figure out.
hours to run through all
Yeah,
the
it's
problems
a
and like
mess. It's
little
a
things to
complete mess.
fix. So maybe
Yes,
let's keep
absolutely.
the podcast moving. Maybe try to get Joe
Yeah.
and Martin involved a little bit. I was thinking maybe for a next topic, kind of going off the potential dollarization in 2 years. So do you think like right now is maybe like a cool little golden age where it's going to be very high inflation for 2 years? It's going to be cheap, but there's a lot of hope. And so it should be like, pretty safe, pretty good vibes. And it'll be a great time for digital nomads to spend time in Argentina. And they're going to, see a lot of cool changes going on. But before the dollarization, and you know what I'm getting at.
Actually,
Go
Yeah.
ahead, Martin.
In the city.
what we've
Oh,
seen,
sorry.
what I'm seeing right now personally, and you guys might know, like I don't really pay attention to Argentine politics or financial policy or anything, but I'm personally seeing prices increasing a lot right now, and the dollar is not getting stronger. It's actually getting weaker against the peso. So I'd say my cost of living in the last 2 weeks is probably going up like 20%. Now it's still cheap, and I don't know if that's being like if that blue rate is being artificially tinkered with. It definitely was before the election, but I'm seeing prices rise right now personally. I don't know if that's going to continue, if that's going to change when Milei actually assumes office, but that's what I'm seeing.
Mara, what are your thoughts on this? You think, because Mara is all about telling us about the $10 stakes on Twitter. So
Well, yeah, I think it's temporary. The thing is that the central bank started giving out this new instrument that everybody's buying, so there's a lot of peso demand and less dollar demand. So that's one of the reasons why the blue rate is going down, and your stakes are getting more expensive. But that should end soon because they're trying to stop the central bank from doing that because that makes everything even more inflationary. Because technically, it should be the blue rate should be way higher. Um, and I think the price levels will remain around these levels. It might become a little bit more expensive in dollar terms. I think what's especially going to increase is temporary rentals. I've seen that in the last couple of months. It's become a lot more expensive to rent on Airbnb, etc.
oh, really?
Yeah, compared to last year or a year and a half ago, definitely.
So
And
tell me, do you think 6 months from now and 1 year from now, overall, Argentina is going to be cheaper or more expensive?
More expensive to live in terms of paying rent. More or less the same quality of life of going out for dinner, going out for beers, etc. I don't think that is going to change too much in dollar terms, but I think the furnished rentals are going to go up. especially in locations like Palermo, et cetera. There's just too much demand right now. And
Okay,
I
so
don't
more
think,
demand from Milei
yeah, and yeah,
enthusiasts,
exactly. Yeah.
but you think that basically will be flat for cost of living. Like if someone, let's just say they had their rent locked in or whatever,
Mhm.
um, everything else flat, more or less.
Yeah,
That's
more
your
or
thought?
less. Yeah, a little bit of an increase because in all my time here in the 20 years, I've never seen Buenos Aires this cheap. Like it's really, really cheap. You can, in a neighborhood restaurant, you can have a steak for like $7 or $8. I mean, it's always been around, $12 normally. So I think it's going to move back to, 10, 12 in neighborhood restaurants. In really touristy places, it's a lot more expensive. Uh, but I think those prices will more or less stay the same. Um, but overall, yeah, there is going to be an increase just because of demand. And I see a lot of people coming here or wanting to come here or invest, etc. Now that Millet has won, it's funny
Definitely.
how that works. It's not like everybody says it's not going to be a change from today to tomorrow, but there's definitely interest. Yeah.
Yeah, I arrived in Argentina in 2019, so I've been here for a while and seen a lot of price fluctuations. And I would agree that I think earlier this year was some of the cheapest I'd ever seen it. It definitely like ebbs and flows just depending on how the blue dollar moves. Because what you'll notice is like prices will hit really hard and have a pretty intense surge. So there might be like a period of like a week or two where you're paying like 20% more for something than you were, 30% more for something than you were. And then all of a sudden the blue dollar will just like shoot up, 50%. And during those times, like it's extremely cheap. Like when you have that kind of like week or two buffer when the dollar hits hard and then the peso is like, or prices, excuse me, are dragging. It's really strange. And then also like just another note too, I think most people are probably gonna be in like Buenos Aires and specifically in the top tier neighborhoods, Palermo, Recoleta, Belgrano, etc. It's important to note that like once you get out of those neighborhoods and especially into like, tier B cities, for example, it gets quite a bit cheaper even. So it's like, it's like pretty shocking to see actually.
Yeah, you can see it in prices too. The square meter prices in Palermo, Recoleta, like all these more touristy neighborhoods, they're around 3K per square meter. And if you go outside of that little bubble, it's already 2K. So it's like a third cheaper versus those really more expensive neighborhoods. And they can be adjacent neighborhoods like Villa Crespo or some of the other ones that are really close. You can, five blocks you walk to Palermo, and you're at the same plaza, and the prices are a lot cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got a buddy living in Mar del Plata, and I just caught up with him over the past 3 days. He coming into town to see the what was it, Red Hot Chili Peppers? They were playing at a
Yeah,
concert
yeah, they were
in
playing
the
this week.
city.
Yeah,
Yeah, so he reckons prices down in the beach, so just 3 hours away from the city. For people who don't know, it's a little beach town. It's a good city, Mar del Plata. I think there's a few 100,000 people living in the city. He thinks prices are 50% cheaper down there than they are in the city, which is wild.
yeah, that's the case in most of the interior cities. It's just so much cheaper. Also to rent, and the thing is, like, there's not always enough accommodation in Mar del Plata. Yes, because it's a very internal touristic city. But if you go to other cities, like the Airbnb offerings might not be what you'd expect for even like.
Hey guys, quick interruption to tell you about Bitrefill. Bitrefill is the best way to convert your crypto into gift card balances. These are gift cards that you can spend at hotels.com, Airbnb, Nike, and many more. You may remember Joel Valenzuela, previous podcast guest. He's been living on crypto exclusively since 2015, and he's a big consumer of Bitrefill. And so I asked Joel, I said, what do you like most about Bitrefill? He said that he likes the instant delivery, the precise amount so that you don't have to juggle a lot of gift cards, and he loves the global selection. Nobody else has this much selection of gift cards, over 10,000 gift card options across hundreds of countries. Go to bitrefill.com to sign up. And you can also use the code MyLatinLife for 10% back off your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information.
200, 300,000 inhabitant cities. There just might not be enough Airbnbs.
Yeah, Mara.
Yeah, Patagonia would be the exception of like being pretty expensive.
Oh yeah.
Both accommodation and like food, like everything's just more expensive in Patagonia.
Yeah, it's
Where do you think
logistics.
Mendoza sits? Is Mendoza like more expensive, cheaper?
Affordable.
Yeah, I'd say affordable too.
Cheaper than Buenos Aires?
So the very expensive place is Bariloche,
Mhm.
which is
Yeah.
a
What are the
city.
most expensive and the cheapest cities in Argentina? Top 3 of each.
Most expensive, I would say Barrio Parque.
That's
It's
a city?
the
No,
Barrio?
but
most
city.
expensive
No,
place. So
cities.
you would
So
have.
not
City. So it'd be
barrios.
like Bariloche maybe number 1, Buenos Aires number
Okay,
2.
so City of Buenos Aires, Bariloche,
Yeah,
and
Carilo is
Cariló,
probably it's a beach
I
town
think.
also on the way to Mar del Plata.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the cheapest? Well, I guess that'll be like Salta and Jujuy
Yeah, I
and
think the
Tucumán and stuff like
north.
that.
Yeah,
Anywhere in the north.
north anywhere. Yeah,
Misiones.
Misiones is pretty cheap
Yeah.
too. Like all those northern
Yes, yeah,
provinces. Yeah.
for sure. Formosa and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
The north,
I
Corrientes.
think
Oh yeah.
Mara
the north is
found.
also
Didn't
very
you find
underrated.
like
Yeah.
It's awesome up there. Like it's super cool. No one really like everyone thinks about Buenos Aires and Patagonia, but the north is like very underrated for tourism and hanging out. Like it's
Yeah, road
awesome.
trips there are so cool.
you have
When you say north, what do you mean, Martin? What do you like?
the Iguazu waterfalls?
Like Jujuy province, like even Formosa, Corrientes, all of it is awesome. I really like the north. I haven't been to Misiones, so I can't speak on that. But I think like around like San Juan, Salta, Jujuy, all of that's really really cool. Cool landscape.
Backtracking a little bit to something you said earlier, Mara, you surprised me. So if we're talking about this potential, 2-year path to dollarization, let's say maybe we get it around 2025, I would have expected, prices to rise maybe after we get the dollarization. But am I correct? Were you saying you expect prices to rise from now? So even if we have like a 2-year period to dollarization, and we do see a significant inflation spike, like I'm not sure if you said 300 or 400% potentially. Do
Yeah.
you still expect prices to to get more expensive leading into dollarization throughout this like 2-year window?
Yeah, I do expect them to become a little bit more expensive. Yeah, but not like crazy. I'd say max 20% in dollar terms. Not a whole lot more, just because I don't think salaries or local salaries are going to pick up to that kind of inflation in dollar terms.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, we'll have to see how that plays out.
Fascinating. For anyone who hasn't been to Argentina and they're listening to this, you should definitely come check it out. Cheapest city I found in Latin America. Super cheap.
Like worst case scenario, steak goes from
Yeah.
$10 to
Exactly.
13 bucks.
It's still like a
Domino's is
third
still there.
or a half. Yeah.
Really not changed.
Yeah, I mean, even when I was there in 2020, an old fashioned at a bar was like $2, 250. It was like insanely cheap.
Yeah.
So, and that was when
Yeah.
it was like 65, 75 pesos to the dollar. So even though it's more than 10x, it's still like somehow, 250 for a cocktail.
I mean, and you don't even have to go to something that Argentina has. The food is really good almost no matter where you go, right? So you don't have to go to the most expensive coffee shop. You don't have to go to the most expensive steakhouse. You can just walk around the city, find some like nice coffee shop that has some random plastic table, and you're gonna get an amazing coffee, right? Uh, the same with food. Like you don't have to go to the expensive places. You can ask Mara. He uploads pictures of
Yeah, I
random.
I
actually
feel like
enjoy the barrio ones better, just because they're more like familiar, small. Yeah.
For
I feel like that's anywhere in Latin America. That's definitely a theme. If they've got plastic chairs and like a broken speaker from 2002 that's blaring like cumbia, those are the best spots.
Yeah, now I miss the botecos in Brazil. I mean, those are my favorite places on earth. I think those plastic chairs, like sipping on cachaça, it's just so good.
That's cool. So I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this because they're investigating for themselves. Should I go check out Argentina? Should I maybe move to Argentina? I've seen a huge uptick in interest in people interested in residency or moving to Argentina. I've heard a lot of people say, maybe it's the time I buy a cabin in Bariloche or something like that. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
In terms of real estate, I do think we kind of hit the bottom this year. It's still, it's more expensive than at least in Buenos Aires. In other parts of the country, not so much. But yeah, it's relatively expensive for a Latin American city to buy in, desirable neighborhoods like Palermo, et cetera. You're looking at, $3,000 per square meter. But if you compare it to 2018, it did drop like 20% or more. That was the peak. The previous peak around Macri was 2018, and then during COVID, it really crashed. A lot of people left the country, had to sell like in a hurry, etc. And we can see it bottoming out in the last couple of months. So I do think that it's definitely not going to go down from here, no matter what happens. Even though we get like 500% inflation, etc., it doesn't really matter for properties because it's all savings that are allocated in those properties. And most people that have property, they don't really have the urge to sell it anytime soon, unless there's some kind of emergency. And they really want to leave the country now, like what you see in Venezuela. I don't think that kind of dynamic is at play right now. Right. So I would say don't be in a hurry. There's enough time. There's enough on the market. You can just right now it's really illiquid. So whatever you buy, you can probably still get a discount of 7-10%. Before it was about 20% because it was really not moving last year and the year before. But now things are moving, picking up a little bit more. But don't be in a hurry. I think you still have time in the next year 2 years to buy stuff. Nice thing is that everything is in dollars. So if you manage your property well in a nice neighborhood, it's like 8% return in dollars. And if you have a lot of bookings, you can come to like 10%. The thing is, you have to pay it all upfront. That's the only downside because there's no mortgages. But that's also the upside because that's why property prices don't go down that much. Because if they were tied to mortgages, like everybody would just default on their mortgage under these kind of circumstances, and a lot of properties would hit the market.
And Mara, I've been talking to a few migration investors over the last few weeks about Argentina specifically, obviously, and what they claim is the thing that will really bring back the Argentine economy is the mortgages. Does that happen? Do mortgages come back to Argentina when Argentina dollarizes, or is that when the peso starts to not hyperinflate? What is the trigger when mortgages start to come back in Argentina?
I think dollarizing, because that's what happened in the 90s too. There's so many people that were able to buy property that otherwise couldn't, even with like very, normal paying jobs. And during the 90s, there was a lot of mortgages that came on the market just because they pegged 1-to-1 to the dollar. So many, middle class homes were able to buy a house during that period. So yeah, I think if credit can come back, that will definitely be a boom. And then I think then you can see some crazy stuff in the real estate market here. If credit really comes back, we can really see some prices spike a lot more. Because I think with everything that's going on in Europe, I think we're going to have an influx of Europeans again here. because
Yeah.
I seriously, sometimes I think about it. What if everything turns to shit here? I'm going to go back to Europe? Hell no. Like with war, with war on the border, how everything is playing out with digital ID demographics that suck. The whole cultural issue with the clash between sort of like the new immigrants and people that were already there.
Right.
I only
Carbon
see that,
taxes.
yeah, carbon taxes, all the climate commies. I really see that, become worse and worse and worse. And I spoke to a lot of Germans already that they're just fed up with it, and they just want to buy land in Paraguay or wherever just to be left alone, basically.
Hmm.
So if I'm hearing that right, then Mara, the Argentine property market could be set up for a pretty nice catalyst if we do see dollarization in, let's say, 2024, 2025. So for anyone holding on to some Bitcoin, you know that the Bitcoin halving happens in 2024. And typically you see a pretty face melting rally in the 12 to 18 months following the Bitcoin halving. So if you see a Bitcoin peak in 2025, that could nearly be the perfect time to trim some sats and buy some property in Argentina just before mortgages return. Am I reading into that right, or what do
Yeah,
you guys think?
that's actually how I would do it. Yeah, that if we get another face ripping rally, which I do think it's probably in the cards with the ETF. I'm not so sure if the halving really has such an impact on that, but uh, we'll see. We'll see what happens. If it does, then yeah, I'm definitely going to trim an apartment or something, just
Mhm.
to diversify.
Yeah. I mean, even anywhere in Latin America, it's still hard to get a mortgage
Yeah.
for foreigners, though, at least, and even for locals, like it's still expensive, you know. So they are still largely cash markets in places like Mexico and Ecuador and things like that. Beyond real estate, what about a lot of people's normal concerns, like the day to day concerns about can my kid find a good school? Am I going to get a good doctor? Just like day to day life stuff in Argentina, what would you say to North Americans and Europeans who are thinking about making the move?
Well, I'd say for both, it's really on par or better in terms of service. Of course, if you need to do really complicated stuff, like some kind of cancer treatment that only exists in the U.S. or in Europe, yeah, of course, then you're going to have to do that there. But like the main medical treatment hospitals, private hospitals, are very very high quality. And I've had both of my daughters in private clinics here. It's more like a hotel where everything is really luxurious. Like coming from the Netherlands, it's just like wow, because everything is sort of public in the Netherlands. You only get one consult per doctor. Everything takes forever. There's nothing works. So this was a really nice change because here if you're sick, you just call the doctor and they just come to your home. It's very luxurious for at least from my European perspective, and it doesn't cost anything. I mean, we're paying I think $300 a month for the whole family of four, and everything is included. I mean, we've never ever have to pay for anything. I think we could even do two facelifts or aesthetic surgeries per year if we wanted to.
I was gonna say, bro. No, I'm joking.
Yeah. I mean, there's a caveat for that though. Like right now, we have
Yeah.
some serious issues with imports. So a lot of medical supplies cannot get inside the country, and it's really bad. Up to the point that the medical association did made an announcement that says if you get a heart attack, you're dead because we don't have the supplies to treat you. So again, with everything that Mara said, I completely agree. But I would
Yeah,
just
Let
just
me
wait
ask
for a
though.
year
So that's a
and see
good
what happens.
counterbalance. But what do you think just about the holistic picture of a North American family or a European family that wants to move to Argentina or the Southern Cone in general? What advice would you have to a family of four, let's say, with like young kids, or just like the whole idea of moving to a new continent? Are they going to be able to integrate well? Is it good timing? Things like that.
Argentine culture is very welcoming to immigrants, especially white immigrants. Uh, I would advise that, yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds bad, but it's reality. Let's face it. Uh, I would say learn Spanish and get to know a little bit about the
Yeah, I've talked
culture
about it. Oh, sorry.
first. I would like to ask Martin what his experience
I've talked
was
a little bit about
when he
this,
just come.
and I think it's an easier adjustment for Europeans to come to Argentina because the lifestyle is a little bit more like kind of what they're used to. I think it's a little bit harder for Americans and North Americans to come to Argentina, and I think the reason for that, like to to um, to your point about the import taxes and being difficult to just like get things, that's a real problem in Argentina. Like you really have to be willing to. I think in certain countries in LATAM, like you can kind of just live like like in your little gringo bubble. I'm thinking about Mexico. I'm thinking about Central America, Panama, etc. And I think in Argentina, it's a bit of a different story where like you really have to be able to adapt and get into the Argentine like lifestyle culture and like their products, everything, if you want to make it here long term. I think most expats, like Mara is a serious like exception. I don't think most expats make it here long term, but not what I've seen. I've seen most kind of leave after a couple of years, and I think a lot of that is just due to like you really have to fully commit to being like in the Argentine lifestyle and bubble and culture and everything if you want to make it here over the long term. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's a very
Yeah.
overpowering
I
culture.
mean, that's also my experience in terms of, friends from that I've made here over the years. Like most of them, few exceptions, have all left after, sometimes 4 or 5 years or whatever. But they, at a certain point, especially if they had local work here, then, they just got fed up with it and decided to leave.
And you compare that to like a
Yeah.
Mexico where I think you do see people that stay there for many, 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 many years over the long term. And I think it is just due to like, they really like Mexico is just, it's North America. They like seriously cater to like the American lifestyle. You're not changing that much if you move from
Yeah.
Texas to whatever, Mexico City or whatever. You really are changing if you're moving to Buenos Aires in the Argentine lifestyle. Like it's an adjustment for sure. And I think it's something that, like I mentioned, I think Europeans kind of can handle it a little bit better, just because it's more like similar to what they're used to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's correct.
Something that I can say for Americans, because I'm in America right now, the biggest change you're going to notice if you go to Argentina is people do everything late. Uh, you have in this United States, you have dinner at 5, 6. In Argentina, you can have dinner at midnight. You go to a bar, it's open until 4, 5, 6 in the morning. You go to a nightclub, people will party until the sun rises. Everything is done really late. If you're used to waking up early and going to bed early, having fun, it's going to be kind of difficult. Most social activities are done at night, and again, they are done very late in the night.
Mara,
Mm.
one thing I want to make sure that we get to, and maybe Vance, this is your next question, but I don't want to leave this call without talking about like residency and citizenship in Argentina, because I
Hmm.
bet a lot of people who are listening to this are wondering, what is the path to residency? How can I get residency? How long until citizenship after that? How does this whole process work? So if you
Um,
could like walk through that, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny in Argentina, and I think Vance tweeted about this as well the other day, is that you can, as a non-Mercosur passport, it takes you 3 years before you get permanent residency, but within 2 years you can actually apply for citizenship. So Mercosur passport holders, they get permanent residency after 2 years, and all the other passports after 3 years. But before that happens, you can already, if you have enough ties to the country, you can already book an appointment with the judge and basically convince him that you have enough ties, like can be a property, or if you had a child here, or you have work relationships, etc. And technically they don't get rejected, or if you do, you can book try to book with another judge, and it's one of the fastest routes to citizenship in the world. Like, it's only 2 years, so it's kind of crazy. And actually, it's in the Constitution, where it says, like, any inhabitant of Argentina after 2 years has the option to naturalize. So what that means is that you don't even need to have a visa for that to happen, which is kind of weird. But a lot of Russians, for example, and now with the conflict, war going on, they've come here, either with a pregnant wife, or had a baby here after a while. They don't even have a visa, a residency visa. They just have the kid, wait it out for 2 years, then apply, and they file, and that's it. Or they buy a house, and then they file. So it's becoming, like, very crowded. So actually, there's some lawyers that are already advising, like, yeah, if you can get a an address outside of the city, that's probably going to be better, because the courts are less congested. Because right now there's like a waiting line with all these people trying to file for citizenship, and it can take like quite a while
Good
longer.
intel.
Yeah.
Good intel. Can we double down on a point there? Did you say that, you're eligible after 2 years of inhabitants,
Yes.
if that's a word, but you can begin your case before you hit 2 years? You can. Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Quick break from the podcast to tell you about Language Blend, the best new way to learn Spanish. Language Blend was co-founded by Jake Nomada, friend of the podcast, decade of experience in Latin America. And Jake and his team, they put everything into this program that they wish they had in terms of how to level up quickly with your Spanish language skills. Because the faster that you can get conversationally fluent in Spanish, the better the experience that you're going to have in Latin America. So go to languageblend.com for more information. Apply before you hit the 2-year mark?
I think you can apply, so the appointment is after the 2-year mark. Because getting the appointment also takes a month, or can take like 2 months. But it has to be after those 2 years. Yeah.
Because I've maybe heard some whispers about people that, because the process takes like 2 years, that they just apply very soon after arriving. And then they expect it's going to take a year and a half to get seen by a judge. And they've just kind of like just jumped up in the line. And they applied when they've only been there for a couple months.
Well, yeah, I've seen those. I've seen a couple of those cases too. And if you have a good enough case, you're just going to get the citizenship. I mean, that's just not a problem. Um, I mean, and buying property is already a good enough reason.
In terms of the requirements, Mara, I don't know if you touched on that, but is it 6 months of physical presence per year in those 2 years?
Yeah.
And obviously economic ties. But is there any investment required or anything like that?
So you can get residency on a couple of different visas that lead to permanent residency. The most popular one is probably the Rentista, which you just have to show passive income. On paper, it's $2,000, but in practice, it's more like 700, 800 because of the blue rate difference. And you can basically deposit those pesos at the bank every single month, so you can technically rotate those. it doesn't. They don't have to come in. So, so just so people know that that can be done. That's the most popular one. Then other ones are employment contracts. You can, of course, that's not such a popular option to start earning in pesos, but I mean that's how most people back in the day got it, because the rentista wasn't that popular yet. There are some, companies that sort of provide that option, and you don't really have to be there all the time. They just pay your social benefits, etc., to the taxman, and that's it. And yes, you do have to physically be 6 months in the country, and that is actually checked by Migraciones in your passport. So if you haven't been in the country for at least 6 months, you can leave and come and as much times as you want, but you have to be those 6 months there for them to renew the temporary residency after a year, and then eventually after the third year give you a permanent residency. And then once you have permanent residency, it doesn't matter anymore. You can just stay as long or short as you like.
Something important to say. I think my Latin life tweeted about it a couple months ago. If you get Argentine citizenship, it's
Yeah, that
almost
is true. I
impossible
mean,
to get rid of it.
yeah,
So it's make sure that you're making the
But
commitment,
we've since figured out
because
that
the tax
naturalized
laws.
citizens can renounce, but it is a process, right? You have to put a
yeah,
case before the judge, and it's like a whole court thing. It's
yeah,
not like you just show up at the embassy and hand over the passport. So you can't instantly relinquish it, but it can be done.
yeah.
That's my latest understanding of it.
Yeah, you basically have to sue the state, and it takes like a few years, and then you can get rid of it. So it's not that easy. But at the same time, people always say like, "Oh yeah, but then if they might do citizenship based taxation, then I don't want to pay taxes in Argentina, etc." I mean, the chances that any Latin American country or even any European country is able to enforce that are practically close to zero. France has looked into citizenship based taxation, and the costs to implement that were basically higher than what they would ever get out of it, because it's not just
Oh,
like,
who's Francis, by the way?
sorry?
Oh, France, the country, or
France, the
who?
country, yes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah. They were looking into it, and the cost benefit was just not there, because it's not like from today they can say like, hey, now we're going to tax all of our citizens no matter where they live. Uh, they have to re-sign all the tax treaties that they have with all the countries. Then, in able to enforce it, they can't even enforce it because they don't have the bank control that the U.S. has. So making sure that people pay those taxes is going to be even more expensive. So in the end, they just decided not to, and I think that's a good case for what's going to happen in most countries. Probably, if a country like France would go ahead with something like that, they would probably give more fines and whatever, maybe even jail time if you don't comply with it. But in Argentina or Brazil, etc., I really think that would just be a little bit above Eritrea in terms of enforcement. It's just not.
They
No,
just can't do it. They cannot do it to your most Argentine
yeah,
dollars
yeah,
are
exactly.
in Uruguay, in just any random bank, so it's literally next to us, next to the city, and they just call the bank, and the Uruguay bank says, I don't know what you're talking about, and hangs, and that's it, and they can't just do anything. It's too
I mean, they can't
expensive
even they
for
can't
what
even
they get.
tax their citizens.
Like,
Nobody
imagine.
pays taxes here. It's like, how are they going to do it internationally? It's impossible.
Yeah,
I have a thought. I have a thought though. Martin,
How's
actually,
the
go ahead.
economy
I've
under
asked
the table?
Argentines, like in the city, they like open up a bank account and they send themselves like dollars into their accounts or whatever at the blue rate, and I'm just like, aren't you worried like that someone's gonna see this and tax this? And they're like, are you joking? Like, I'm pretty sure the only tax that gets paid is like if you have an actual job. If you have like an actual job in Argentina, they take the taxes like out of your sueldo, like your income. So I think that's like the only
Yeah.
taxes that are actually getting paid. Maybe property as well. And then
I think the
I've
rule of
also heard outside of Buenos Aires, the rules get even like more wild, wild west. Like I've heard like no one pays property taxes on their stuff outside of Buenos Aires, basically.
I think the province of Buenos Aires is actually a little bit more of the enforcement kind of tax collector, but after the province of Buenos
Like
Aires, you're right. It's like,
Cordoba, whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah. I don't
yeah,
think anyone's stressing about it.
no.
I think the rule of thumb is that unless you're like moving in and out like 10 grand per month, the bank is
Yeah,
just
that's
not going
correct.
to
I
do
mean,
anything.
it happened to me. I changed accountants earlier this year in January because I was kind of all over the place in the last couple of years, and I paid some guy to like file zero for my company, but I wasn't really sure if he was actually doing anything for my personal taxes. So I decided to switch and switch to a very good guy, and I knew that he was like a lot more detailed, and I asked him, "So, could you check my personal tax situation?" And he said, "Like, you haven't filed taxes in 4 years." What happened? Nothing. So he said, like, this is actually a good thing because now we can sort of bump up the numbers, and you can actually have more savings. And yeah, so you can be very creative with those kind of things because there's seriously, if you're not like a big fish, nobody cares at the tax office here. Nobody gives a damn.
Does
There's also a political question that we have to make. When Milei is in power and after he makes all the reforms, it is going to be as easy to just not pay taxes, right? Because the idea is that he's going to lower taxes, get rid of regulations, but more people should start paying taxes. That's kind of the idea. Do you think, Mara, that it's going to be as easy maybe in 5 6 years as it is
Well, it's
now?
probably going to get, I hope that it gets a little bit harder because right now it's just like a complete jungle out there. It's explainable too because it's just there's too many taxes on top of each other layered, and sometimes you pay stuff twice or three times. It just doesn't make any sense. So everybody tries to pay as little tax as possible. It's basically the Laffer curve, and I think once they get rid of a lot of those taxes,
Yeah.
then yes, of course. Usually that's what you see. You see, you could actually collect more tax than you did before.
Because Milei has said that. So currently in Argentina, almost half
Yeah,
of the economy is under the table, what we call economía negro. Uh, Milei has said multiple times that he wants to make that under the table economy turn it on the books, right? But he promises that, of course, they're going to have lower taxes, a better tax regime. But that means that if they want to get rid of the under the table economy, they will have to be more, you know, eager to investigate and enforce the tax
yeah. They're
law.
going to have to enforce it a little bit better. But also, I think the incentives are there to actually, you don't have to create all these weird ass structures if everything's just working. Right now everybody has like, companies that are sending ghost invoices, and it's just a complete mess. And I think all that's going to go away once you don't have to pay ridiculous amounts of taxes.
Hmm. Getting away from taxes because I don't want people to get in trouble, but I think we've kind of drilled
Yeah,
on the
none of
point
this is
enough
tax
to get
advice, by the way. This is
none of
just
this
like
tax advice.
anecdotal. So
So, what's our thoughts? Like, is Argentina citizenship worth pursuing? James, you've been getting into this world the past year. I think you're still just American. You need another one. What are you thinking? Would you rock with Argentina citizenship?
Yeah, I'm the lowly sole American, only one passport, but working my way towards a second. Anyway, I would consider it. I think my sights are set more on Mexico and Brazil, especially Brazil with the connection to Portugal and the EU passport.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, there are other ways to get EU passports if you're interested in Latin America through Spain, through your spouse, and then birthright citizenship in Mexico and Brazil. Argentina's up there for me. I just love the lifestyle there, so I would consider it. But I think those are the things that you should be considering when you're thinking about Argentine citizenship. It's such a promising country in my eyes that it's such a beautiful culture, beautiful architecture, beautiful food and culture surrounding food. It would be interesting to be a bigger piece of that and diversify the nationality stack with an Argentine citizenship. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think also, most listeners would probably know this, but by now, but the Brazilian and the Argentine passport and a lot of the South American passports, they give residency rights in most of the other countries. So that's a huge plus. If you have a European passport and a Mercosur passport, it really broadens the spectrum a lot. And then I think Brazil has the additional benefit of, like you said, the Portuguese-speaking countries. They have residency rights there too, or very easy to get like temporary residency right away with that passport. So that's definitely one I would consider as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence. I think if anyone just needs a second passport, this is one of your fastest options in the world for sure. And it's not that bad one, really, all things considered at all. Really has a lot going for it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of paradoxical. I think such a like a country like Argentina that could be a economic powerhouse, that used to be an economic powerhouse, that has such a strong culture and strong cultural pull from around the world, to be able to get citizenship in 2 years is, I think, pretty crazy. At least in Latin America.
Yeah,
It's a
Yeah.
strong passport.
yeah, it is.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, James. Sole Australian passport, and the government came out this year and started talking about the potential of citizenship based
Yeah.
taxation for Australians. So, like, I'm seriously considering Argentinian passport, and then maybe popping a baby out in Brazil next year, trying to work my way towards getting that Brazilian passport. So, Brazilian, Argentinian, they look like the easiest ones to me. I haven't looked into Mexico much, but yeah, they're the ones I'm seriously looking at.
I think
Yeah.
Mexico with a baby, it's also 1 year, right? Or is it longer?
18 months.
18 months. Okay.
The only issue I've got is, believe it or not, my Salvadorian girlfriend can't get into Mexico, even though the countries are nearly neighboring each other. She needs a
Wow.
visa to get into Mexico.
But she can get into Brazil and Argentina.
Yep.
Ah.
Wow.
Well, if you
Yeah,
want
I
to come
have
up to Mexico and party with me, leave the girlfriend behind with me.
Vamos. She'll be right.
Luke. I have some of those same issues because my girlfriend's Colombian and she can't obviously enter the United States. The
Yep.
visa waiting period is about 2 years just to get an appointment when they're gonna
Wow.
70% chance of getting rejected.
Yep.
So it's tough to date someone with a kind of a weak passport.
Yeah, it's a real struggle. I've had to turn down so many opportunities because most of my work's in America. So, yeah. And how about Europe? How does your girlfriend go getting into Europe? Is she okay there?
Yep, she's fine, and she also has EU access.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
but
very
that's
cool.
Colombia for anybody
Yeah,
listening.
every country, every Latin American passport has EU access, except I think Ecuador and maybe one other.
Hmm.
Yeah, but it's just the U.S. Canada thing is tough, and I guess Mexico for a couple of them, like Brazil, they took away EU or they took away Mexico access for Brazilians, for example.
That's such a weird move. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
I think
It's a
I
weird one.
misspoke just a second ago, by the way. Colombia has EU access. They've had that for a while.
Yeah.
They just
No,
got
you said it right.
UK access. They just
Oh,
got
they don't have UK. They don't have
they
UK.
just got it like a year ago.
Oh, they got it. Okay,
Colombia
good.
now has UK access. Yep.
Yeah, dude. So did you apply for the visa for the US 10-year tourist visa for your girlfriend yet? Like
Yep.
like you
And
got an appointment, it's just in
we
2025?
we applied in March of 23. Funny enough, when we were in Argentina, and her appointment is not until May of 25.
Oof.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
that's crazy.
There's a little trick. So I learned it by experience. Every night at midnight, like exactly 0000, the U.S. Embassy will update their database, and there's a lot of people that will cancel their appointments. So if you're willing to check
Mhm.
every single night, like I did, you can find
Oh
a
shit.
way earlier appointment. I started, so I applied for my visa on like July last year, uh, and my appointment was in 2025. In 1 month of trying, I got it in December, so six
That's
months
huge.
instead
Would
of
that be
3 years.
Eastern time?
Wow.
Because it's like,
So
yeah, would it be Eastern time?
yeah,
No,
uh,
like midnight
no
Eastern
Argentine time.
time?
It would be
I think it's probably a local database, so it's yeah. So it's on midnight wherever
yeah
the
local
embassy is.
database. Yeah,
Wherever the embassy. Oh, because it's the embassy
Yeah,
website.
yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
yeah. So it would
Okay,
be
gotcha.
Buenos
Gotcha,
Aires
gotcha.
time zone.
Damn. Okay.
Good insider info.
Mm.
There's actually some people that have made bots
See,
just to get
my
you
lawyer said
the
he was gonna
appointment.
do a bot or something. It just never happened. I don't even know. Or he said he had a bot, but
Yeah. So it's actually hard because you have to compete with the bots to get an earlier
well,
appointment sometimes. But yeah, if you try hard enough, you can in 1 month, maybe 2 months, you can get it way earlier.
interesting. Yeah, so I think a lot of listeners here are gonna have their girlfriend staying up past midnight for the next couple months. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, and I'm almost thinking like what's interesting is the Argentine passport has the lowest. We've talked about this on Twitter, Mara, how the Argentine passport has the world's lowest denial rate for US tourist visas, or in other words, has the highest acceptance rate, like
Yeah.
93%, something like that. And we've given some theories as to why that is, but it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think overall the Argentines in general are, if they have a return ticket, they're just not that prone to actually go and live somewhere else. They it really has to be absolutely devastating for people to leave, and it's usually younger people leaving for Europe because they already have a second passport and they can live in Europe without any issues, versus trying it in the States. So it's just less common. I think that's one of the reasons why the acceptance rate is so high. Yeah.
Most people just don't have the resources to stay.
No, but I mean,
In the country.
other countries have the same issue, and then they do get rejected because they think even though they don't have the resources, they will overstay their visa and just like become illegal in the states.
Yeah, it's an
Mara,
interesting fun fact. Go ahead.
Mara, I when I was in Buenos Aires, I got to know a lot of the local people. My brother had spent a lot of time there when he was younger, and I got to know a lot of his friends and like the family he stayed with, all this kind of stuff. And a lot of people seemed like desperate and sad and miserable because of the situation going on, but nobody ever mentioned wanting to leave. Do you have like numbers to back up your your claim that, and I believe you, your claim that like people just don't leave no matter the situation, no matter the circumstances? Argentines love
Well,
living in
they definitely leave, and in the last 4 years, I think it's been record numbers, but I haven't seen the numbers after 2021 because they just didn't report on them anymore. But no, there's definitely been an exodus, like a really important one, especially during COVID and after, of a lot of people, families moving, and but yeah, it takes planning, and they're just not the. It's just not that common to just go on the plane with one suitcase and just stay there and see what happens. That's just not their style. I think it's
Not that
really,
entrepreneurial or something.
yeah,
It's mostly young people. I can speak from experience. Me and my friends, like we've been planning to leave for I don't know 6 years, like since we were teenagers. And I think most people who have like a college education may be considering getting out. Most people are probably not gonna do it because it's a huge risk. But the intention it's there. But my ah, most people, yeah, they don't really think about it. Maybe if they're really angry, they will say it, but they will never
I think
do it.
that's a testament to how powerful the
Yeah,
Argentine culture is and the
For
stakes.
sure.
yeah. Yeah, no, I really think so, because you have to weigh a lot of things. Like, even though you have almost 200% hyperinflation, to get the same quality of life. Well, first of all, in other countries you have to declare everything, and then getting the same quality of life, you really have to make a very good income, etc. So yeah, it's not that easy to give this up and then try your luck somewhere else.
and the culture shock is for some is really bad. I can speak for experience. Like I'm in the states, and I just you just cannot relate to anybody.
What's the
It's
hardest
just too
part?
different. People my age are just retarded.
Like the Americans. And so, like, were we talking like late
Yes,
20s or something, or 30s, mid to late 20s? The Americans
mid to
are.
late 20s. Yeah,
What city?
it's yeah,
What
early
city?
20s.
What
It's even
city?
worse. I'm on the suburbs of Pennsylvania, close to Philly. But it's really hard to relate. Something that it's so most people in Argentina do not drive, especially young people. Driving is a luxury, and there are some countries like the States that if you don't have a car, you just don't exist. And for me, that's been huge. And I think for most people that want to go get away from Argentina, that's like the thing that stops them the most, because if you can move
Yeah,
around, you can
that's
you can do anything. So you have culture shock, you have language, you have driving problems. As Mara says, yeah, you would go to United States thinking that you can do all the shady stuff that you do in Argentina. You're going to end
yeah.
up in jail. Like,
Now, walkable cities is definitely a luxury that I do not want
yeah,
to give away. That's why I wouldn't move to most parts in Brazil or the States. I think Brazil and the States are very similar in terms of needing a car for everything. You really need a car in Brazil in most areas, except maybe Rio, in that small area. But even in Florianopolis or Sao Paulo, etc., if you don't have a car, it's just really hard to get out of the city and do something else. And public transportation is just not great. And in the States too, I've never been there without a car. I've always, you just need a car in the States.
Well, thank you guys for all joining us on this late night recording of the Argentina Roundtable. Thank you to Mara, James, Leviathan, Martin, Luke, Joe. Really, really interesting, and we'll have to do some more of these as we get more progress with Milei. This is just the original burst of energy, so we'll see what this is really going to look like in 2024. But this is really fun, just to catch up with a lot of the guys that we talk to all the time on Twitter. So thanks for everyone for joining.